The weathered pine door creaked open to reveal decades of dust and forgotten memories. Ranger Cole Dawson stood in the doorway of the storage cabin he'd purchased for $20 at the county auction. Sunlight filtered through cobwebbed windows, illuminating what locals had dismissed as worthless junk. Old tools, tattered uniforms, and equipment from another era lay scattered throughout. But Cole's trained eye caught something unusual, a slight discoloration on the back wall. When his fingers pressed against it, the false panel gave way, revealing a trunk bearing an insignia he'd only seen in history books. Inside, yellowed letters whispered secrets of rangers long vanished in these very woods. Stories of unexplained lights, unmarked graves, and missions erased from official records. What dark truth had these men uncovered that was worth erasing from history? Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from. And if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. The morning light filtered through pine branches as Cole Dawson adjusted his Forest Service hat. 20 years in these mountains had etched lines around his eyes that matched the bark of the ancient trees he protected. His fingers traced the worn edges of his ranger badge, the same one he'd received on his first day. The brass had dulled, and a small dent marked the time he'd fallen while rescuing a lost hiker in Usher 9. His radio crackled with the morning check-in. "Dawson here. Sector 5, all clear," he reported, voice gravelly from years of mountain air and solitude. Cole's cabin sat at the edge of Blackwater Forest, a modest structure that felt more like home than the house in town he'd inherited from his parents, but rarely visited. Inside, photographs of changing seasons hung alongside topographical maps marked with his handwritten notes. A collection of pine cones, unusual stones, and bird feathers lined his windowsill, small treasures from 2 decades of wilderness walks. Retirement papers sat unsigned on his desk. At 58, the service had been hinting it was time, but Cole couldn't imagine life without his daily rounds. The forest knew him, and he knew it, every ridge, gully, and clearing like the lines on his palm. "Budget cuts again," muttered Frank Tillman, the district supervisor, during their monthly meeting. "They're auctioning off that old storage cabin by Elk Creek. Maintenance costs too high for non-essential structures." Cole remembered that cabin. Old-timers said it had been there since the original Forest Service formation, used for equipment storage, and occasionally as a way station during winter storms. "Auctions tomorrow," Frank added. "County's clearing out everything inside, too. Probably just junk from the 70s, but protocol says public auction." That evening, Cole drove his truck into Riverdale, the small town that served as gateway to the forest. At Mabel's diner, locals nodded respectfully as he took his usual corner booth. "Heard they're selling off the Elk Creek cabin," said Mabel, sliding a mug of coffee across the table. "Shame. My granddad helped build that place," Cole nodded. "Progress, they call it." An elderly man at the counter turned. Cole recognized Walter Simmons, whose family had lived in the valley for generations. "That cabin ain't just storage," Walter said, voice thin but carrying. "Used to be important. Special designation." "What kind of designation?" Cole asked. Walter shrugged. "Before my time. But my daddy said rangers used to leave reports there. The kind that don't go in official records." Cole's interest piqued. In 20 years he'd never heard this. "What kind of reports?" "Things seen but not explained," Walter replied cryptically, then turned back to his pie. The next day, Cole stood among a small crowd as the county clerk read out lot numbers. Most items went to dealers or junk collectors. When the cabin came up, the starting bid of $50 met silence. "Anyone?" "Historical property, sturdy construction," the clerk prompted. Cole raised his hand. $20, he offered, not sure why he was bidding at all. The clerk looked around, going once, twice. "Sold to Ranger Dawson." A few people chuckled. Someone muttered about wasting money on a termite hotel. After signing paperwork, Cole approached Walter, who'd been watching from his truck. "Any other stories about that cabin I should know?" he asked. Walter studied him. "My daddy said there's things in these woods the government don't want folks talking about. Said the old rangers kept track, though." He paused. "You've been here 20 years, but the forest's been here forever." Might be it's got secrets older than all of us. That evening, Cole drove to his new purchase, key heavy in his pocket. The cabin looked unremarkable. Weathered timber walls, small windows clouded with dust, roof needing repairs but essentially sound. Inside, it smelled of mildew and forgotten things. Broken chairs, rusted tools, and cardboard boxes filled the space. Nothing valuable, just as Frank had said. Cole felt a pang of buyer's remorse. As sunlight angled through dirty windows, Cole began sorting through the items, more out of stubbornness than hope. He'd been a ranger long enough to finish what he started. Behind a stack of moldy technical manuals from the 1960s, something caught his eye. A section of wall that didn't quite match the rest. The boards looked identical to untrained eyes, but Cole noticed the subtle difference in aging patterns. He pressed his palm against it, feeling unexpected give. With careful pressure, a small section swung inward, revealing a hidden storage space. And there sat the trunk, dust-covered but intact, bearing the Ranger service insignia he'd only seen in historical photographs. Cole's heart quickened as he lifted it out, surprised by its weight. The brass lock was old but unbroken. For reasons he couldn't articulate, he glanced over his shoulder before trying the key he'd been given, which fit perfectly. The trunk's hinges protested with a haunting creak as Cole lifted the heavy lid. The musty scent of preserved paper and leather rushed out, carrying the weight of forgotten history. Inside, neatly organized despite decades of neglect, lay bundles of letters tied with faded ribbon, journals with cracked leather bindings, and manila envelopes yellowed with age. Cole lifted out the first bundle with careful hands. The top letter bore an official 1902 Forestry Division letterhead, but the insignia differed slightly from modern versions, incorporating mysterious symbols along its border that Cole had never seen in any official capacity. To whom it may concern, began the precise handwriting. This record constitutes the unofficial observations of Ranger Thomas Pierce, Northern Sector, spring 1899 through winter 1902. Cole paused, glancing at the cabin's open door. The forest beyond seemed suddenly different, as if the trees were leaning closer to listen. He pulled the door shut before. Continuing, the letter described establishing observation, protocols for phenomena inconsistent with known natural occurrences. Pierce wrote of lights moving with purpose through nighttime forests, of compass needles spinning wildly in certain clearings, of hikers emerging from 3-day trips with timepieces showing weeks had passed. Beneath the letters lay a leather-bound journal. The first page contained a hand-drawn map of the forest, recognizable yet different from modern charts. Areas Cole knew well contained markings labeled Thin Boundary and Transit Point, while the northern region Pierce mentioned was circled and marked Active Zone, Approach with Caution. As Cole flipped through the pages, a photograph slipped out, sepia-toned, showing 5 men in early forestry uniforms standing before a stone formation. Cole squinted at the round stones arranged in a perfect circle. Despite his encyclopedic knowledge of the forest, he'd never encountered this formation. On the back, written in careful script, Boundary Marker #7, Northern Sector 1901. Digging deeper, Cole found a small wooden box. Inside rested what appeared to be a compass, but unlike any he'd seen. The brass casing was engraved with the same unusual symbols from the letterhead. Its needle didn't point north, but swung erratically when Cole held it, finally settling toward the forest's northern reaches, exactly the area Pierce had marked. The afternoon sun began to fade as Cole methodically examined the trunk's contents. Each item deepened the mystery. A roster listed rangers assigned to special observation duty, with many names marked non-returning. A series of sketches depicted unusual tracks and markings found on trees. Most disturbing were the incident reports, detailed accounts of rangers vanishing while investigating strange occurrences, only to return days or weeks later with no memory of their absence. Cole's training had taught him to observe, analyze, and maintain objectivity. But the precision in these documents, the meticulous dates, coordinates, and measurements, suggested these weren't mere campfire tales. These were field reports from professional observers. As darkness fell, Cole used his flashlight to examine one final item, a small leather pouch containing what appeared to be a stone arrowhead. Unlike typical indigenous artifacts, this one was made from an unfamiliar green-black stone that caught the light oddly, seeming to glow from within when shadows fell across it. A note wrapped around it read simply, "Found at disappearance site, Ranger Lewis McKay, 1900, unidentified material." Cole placed the artifact on the table before him, watching how its subtle luminescence seemed to pulse with his heartbeat. 20 years he'd patrolled these woods, confident he understood their every secret. Now he questioned whether he knew them at all. He gathered the most important documents, Pierce's journal, the map, and several letter bundles, and secured the trunk. The Forest Service had trained him to report unusual findings immediately, but something held him back. The officials who'd readily sold this cabin clearly had no knowledge of its contents. Or perhaps, more troublingly, they did know and had deliberately concealed it. Outside, night had fallen completely. The familiar sounds of the forest, owl calls, rustling branches, distant streams, now carried new undertones. Cole could have sworn he caught a faint glow between distant trees. There and gone so quickly he might have imagined it. He locked the cabin and climbed into his truck, Pierce's journal and the strange compass heavy in his pocket. The compass needle spun lazily, then jerked northward as if pulled by an invisible force. Cole started the engine, unable to shake the feeling that after 20 years of watching the forest had finally decided to reveal itself and was now watching him. Back in his cabin, Cole spread the letters across his kitchen table, organizing them chronologically. The oldest, dated April 18, 1899, was written on personal stationery rather than official letterhead. The paper had yellowed with age, but Thomas Pierce's handwriting remained clear and deliberate, the script of a man accustomed to keeping precise records. "I witnessed it again last night," Pierce wrote. "The lights above Widow's Peak moved with purpose, forming patterns too regular for natural phenomena. Jenkins claims they're merely atmospheric oddities, but I've watched lightning storms for 20 years and know the difference between nature's randomness and intelligent design." Cole paused, his finger tracing the mention of Widow's Peak. The craggy outcropping still bore that name, though it rarely appeared on modern maps. He'd been there dozens of times, even spent a night camped below it during a 3-day patrol. Never had he observed unusual lights. The next letter, dated 2 weeks later, described indigenous warnings. "Old Joseph from the Kaskawan tribe visited the outpost today," Pierce wrote. "When I mentioned the lights, he grew solemn and spoke of thin places where the boundaries between worlds weaken. His people have avoided the northern ridges for generations, claiming those who linger too long walk between worlds and return changed, if they return at all." Cole pulled out his Forest Service map, comparing it to Pierce's hand-drawn version. The northern sector had changed little topographically, but Pierce had marked several locations with symbols that appeared on no official chart. One mark, labeled First Contact Site, sat near what modern maps showed as an unremarkable clearing. A later letter described missing hikers. The Lundgren brothers set out for a 2-day hunting trip on Tuesday. They emerged from the forest on Friday, insisting only hours had passed. Their watches had stopped, yet 5 days had elapsed. More disturbing, their journals showed entries for each day, written in their own hand, which they have no memory of writing. Cole found himself reaching for a leather pouch he'd discovered in the trunk. Inside was a pocket watch, its silver case engraved with the initials TP. When opened, its face revealed unusual markings around the perimeter, astronomical symbols mingling with the hours. Most peculiar was its second hand, which moved in sporadic jumps rather than smooth sweeps, sometimes pausing entirely before rushing to catch up. Further letters documented Pierce's growing obsession. He'd taken to patrolling the northern sector nightly, cataloging anomalies, inexplicable temperature fluctuations, equipment failures, wildlife behaving erratically. He wrote of streams that occasionally flowed uphill, and rock formations that seemed to shift position between visits. The department has finally acknowledged my reports. Written entry from October 1900. Next month, Dr. Elias Harper and his research team arrive to conduct what they call a thorough scientific investigation. I fear they underestimate what awaits them. Science may have no language for what exists in these woods. Cole searched for subsequent letters about the research team, but found a 3-month gap in correspondence. When the letters resumed in February 1901, Pierce's handwriting had changed, less precise, more hurried, as if written by a man constantly glancing over his shoulder. They're gone. All 5 members of Harper's team vanished near the stone circle. The official report will call it a tragic hiking accident, but the truth cannot be hidden from those of us who have seen. They found something, or something found them. No government men have arrived, asking questions, taking measurements. They wear the insignia of the Forest Service, but answer to someone else. They've established a permanent observation post at the old hunting cabin and restricted access to the northern sector. Cole's hands trembled slightly as he set down the letter. The watch in his palm seemed to pulse with sudden warmth. Its second hand stopped completely for 10 seconds, then spun rapidly forward before resuming its irregular rhythm. Outside, darkness had fallen. Cole's window reflected his troubled expression back at him, and beyond that reflection, the looming shadows of pine trees. For a moment, he thought he saw a flicker of light deep among them, there and gone so quickly he couldn't be certain. Sleep eluded him that night. He lay awake, Pierce's watch ticking irregularly on his nightstand, its inconsistent rhythm matching his troubled thoughts. When he finally drifted off near dawn, he dreamed of standing stones in perfect circles, of lights moving with intelligence through dark forests, and of boundaries between worlds growing thin enough to cross. He woke with a start, sunlight streaming through his window. Pierce's watch had stopped at exactly 3:33, though Cole's modern clock showed 7:05. As he reached for it, the hands suddenly spun forward, ticking normally as if nothing unusual had occurred. Cole made his decision. Today, he would visit the northern sector and find the locations in Pierce's letters. Dawn mist clung to the pines as Cole loaded his truck. He packed methodically, standard ranger gear plus additional supplies for an extended patrol. Officially, he was conducting seasonal wildlife observations. Unofficially, he carried Pierce's journal, the strange compass, and several photocopied letters in a waterproof case. Before departing, Cole studied his topographical maps, marking the locations Pierce had described. Most fell within a 5-mile radius in the northern sector, an area Cole patrolled less frequently due to its rough terrain and lack of established trails. His radio crackled. "Dawson Headquarters. Confirm your patrol route today. Sector 7, Northern Ridgeline," Cole replied. "Check in for elk migration patterns." A pause. "That area had some lightning strikes last week. Watch yourself up there." "Always do," Cole said, feeling a strange unease at the warning. There had been no storms recently. The forest welcomed him with familiar scents, pine resin, damp earth, and the subtle mustiness of fallen leaves. Cole drove as far as the old fire road allowed before continuing on foot, GPS unit in hand. Though he'd programmed Pierce's coordinates, the device kept losing signal, screen flickering between locations miles apart. 3 hours of hiking brought him to the first landmark, a narrow ravine Pierce called Echo Canyon. Modern maps showed nothing significant here, but as Cole descended, he noticed unusual acoustics. His footsteps reverberated oddly, sometimes returning before he took his next step. As if time itself were folded, near the ravine's center, Cole found what he was looking for, a weathered stone marker, half buried in soil and moss. Approximately 3 feet tall, its surface was covered with carvings, spirals, intersecting circles, and symbols resembling astronomical notations. It matched Pierce's sketches exactly, though the ranger had encountered it over 120 years earlier. Cole crouched to examine it, brushing away decades of accumulated debris. His fingers traced a deep groove that spiraled inward to a central depression. Something about the pattern seemed to pull at his vision, creating an unsettling sensation of depth where none should exist. From his pack, Cole retrieved a small metal box he'd found among Pierce's effects. The antique field kit contained measuring tools, specimen vials, and a curious device Pierce called a boundary detector. Made of brass and glass, it resembled a pocket watch, but contained a small pendulum suspended over markings similar to those on the stone. Following Pierce's notes, Cole placed the detector on the stone's flat top. The pendulum immediately began swinging in an expanding spiral, occasionally emitting a soft blue glow. Cole checked his GPS unit, dead despite fresh batteries. His watch had stopped. Even his compass, the normal Forest Service-issued one, spun directionless. Only Pierce's strange compass functioned, pointing steadily toward the next marker on his map. Cole photographed the stone from multiple angles, then carefully packed the detector away. As he did, he noticed the forest had gone completely silent. No birds, no insects, no rustling leaves despite the light breeze he could feel. For the first time in 20 years of wilderness work, Cole felt like an unwelcome intruder. The sensation of being watched pressed against his consciousness, not the normal awareness of wildlife observing a human, but something more intentional. "Just doing my job," he said aloud, feeling foolish but compelled to announce his presence. No harm intended. The silence held for 3 more heartbeats, then broke as a raven called overhead. Normal forest sounds resumed so suddenly it was almost shocking. Cole exhaled, unaware he'd been holding his breath. Following Pierce's compass, Cole hiked another 2 miles northeast. The terrain grew increasingly unfamiliar, though it should have been an area he knew well. Landmarks appeared in unexpected places. Streams crossed paths they shouldn't. Twice he had to backtrack when trails simply ended at solid rock walls not marked on any map. Late afternoon brought him to a clearing dominated by 7 standing stones arranged in a precise circle. In the center stood a larger stone with a flat surface marked with the same spiral pattern. This was the Circle of 7 Pierce had documented extensively, the place where Harper's research team had vanished. As Cole approached, his hand instinctively moved to the boundary detector in his pocket. It vibrated against his fingers, growing warmer. The air in the clearing seemed different, heavier, charged with potential. Shadows stretched at impossible angles, despite the sun's position. Cole carefully set up his camera on a tripod to document the sight. Through the viewfinder, he noticed something odd. Faint, luminous trails connecting the stones, visible only through the lens. He adjusted the camera settings and began recording. The boundary detector grew hot enough to force Cole to remove it from his pocket. In the late afternoon light, the device's pendulum swung frantically, and the glass casing filled with a blue-white luminescence that pulsed like a heartbeat. That's when Cole's radio, silent all day despite regular check-in times, suddenly erupted with static and fragments of a voice that sounded distressingly like his own. Cole spread his findings. Across his living room floor, photographs, notes, and sketches from his expedition arranged in a rough map. His hands still trembled slightly as he labeled each item with meticulous care. Ranger training overriding his unsettled mind. Document everything. Establish patterns. Find explanations. The radio incident had forced his retreat from the stone circle. Hearing his own voice, discussing observations he hadn't yet made, had shattered his scientific detachment. He'd recorded the transmission, but when played back at home, the audio contained only unintelligible static with occasional words emerging. Boundary, crossing, return. Sleep had evaded him for 2 nights now. Whenever he closed his eyes, the spiral patterns from the stones rotated behind his eyelids. His dreams, when they came, were fragmented visions of moving through the forest from perspectives not his own, sometimes impossibly high among the treetops. sometimes low to the ground following unfamiliar paths. Cole's attention turned to a tattered map he'd found folded between the pages of Pierce's journal. Dating from 1901, it showed the forest's northern sector in remarkable detail. Unlike modern survey maps, this one contained notations in the margins. Seasonal thinning, spring equinox, and active transit full moon. Most intriguing were areas marked restricted that corresponded to no current administrative boundaries. The map's legend included symbols absent from standard cartography: concentric, circles marked dormant crossing, triangles labeled observer posts, and shaded regions designated perception distortion zones. Each notation was accompanied by dates and initials, suggesting multiple rangers had contributed to the document over time. Cole picked up his phone and dialed Eleanor Jenkins, the local historian, whose family had lived in the valley for generations. At 78, she maintained the town's small historical society and had an encyclopedic memory for regional tales. "Eleanor, it's Cole Dawson. I need to ask you about the old Forest Service around 1900. Finally found something interesting in that junk cabin, did you?" Her voice carried a knowing tone that startled him. "What makes you say that?" "My grandfather worked alongside those early rangers. Said they kept special records. Things the government men didn't want in official reports." Cole hesitated. "Did he ever mention a Ranger Pierce? Or strange occurrences in the northern sector?" The silence stretched long enough that Cole wondered if the connection had dropped. When Eleanor spoke again, her voice had lowered. "My grandfather had a saying, the forest has two histories, the one they write down and the true one. Come by tomorrow. There are things I shouldn't discuss over the phone." The Historical Society occupied a converted Victorian house on Riverdale's main street. Cole arrived early, carrying copies of Pierce's map and select photographs. Eleanor welcomed him with an appraising look, then locked the door behind him and flipped the sign to closed. "You've seen something, haven't you?" she asked without preamble. When Cole nodded, she disappeared into a back room, returning with a wooden chest. "These belonged to my grandfather, Jacob Jenkins. Forest Service, 1897 to 1932. Inside lay a forest ranger's personal effects, a badge different from modern versions, journals, letters, and photographs. Beneath these, Eleanor carefully lifted out a leather folio tied with cord. "His unofficial records," she explained. "What he called his true account." The folio contained detailed notes spanning decades, describing phenomena eerily similar to Pierce's accounts. More disturbing were newspaper clippings documenting missing hikers and unexplained disappearances, followed by Jacob's terse notations. "Boundary incident or temporal displacement returned. There were more government men than usual in 1902, Eleanor said, pointing to a group photograph. Grandfather called them the observation team, said they wore ranger badges but asked questions no ranger would ask. The photo showed serious men in dark suits standing before the ranger station. Despite their civilian appearance, they carried themselves with military rigidity. One held what looked like scientific equipment. After they came, rangers were ordered not to discuss certain areas of the forest," Eleanor continued. Official boundaries were redrawn. The northern sector was temporarily closed for environmental assessment. When it reopened, new maps had been issued. She pulled out her grandfather's official patrol logs. "Look at the gap. March through November 1902, no entries. When I asked him about it as a child, he would only say, that was when the forest kept its secrets and wise men learned to keep them too." Cole spread Pierce's map beside Jacob's papers. The annotations aligned perfectly. Same locations, same symbols, often the same handwriting, adding notes over the years. "My grandfather mentioned Pierce," Eleanor said quietly. "Said he was the best ranger they had, until he vanished in '02. The official record listed him as transferred. But grandfather knew better," said Pierce. "Went beyond the boundary by choice, whatever that means." She handed Cole a final item from the chest, a leather-bound journal with Jacob Jenkins' name embossed on the cover. "Grandfather's personal account of what happened during those missing months. He made me promise it would only be shared with someone who had seen the truth for themselves. Her eyes fixed on Cole. I believe that's you. Cole hadn't spoken to Michael Chen in nearly 5 years. Not since his former academy classmate had transferred from Forest Service law enforcement to the FBI's Environmental Crimes Division. Their paths had diverged. Cole embracing the solitude of forest stewardship, while Michael pursued increasingly complex investigations in Washington. Yet Michael had answered Cole's cryptic message within hours. Need your expertise on an unusual historical case. Official channels, not an option. The black government SUV looked conspicuously out of place in Cole's dirt driveway. Michael stepped out, still trim in his regulation suit, despite the decades since they'd trained together. His handshake was firm, his smile genuine, but his eyes held the cautious assessment of a federal agent. You look like you haven't slept in days, Michael observed as Cole led him inside. I haven't, Cole admitted, gesturing toward his living room wall where photographs, maps, and documents now formed an investigative mosaic. Michael's FBI badge caught the afternoon light as he removed his jacket. The polished metal and official emblem representing federal authority and institutional power. Unlike Cole's weathered ranger badge connecting him to the wilderness, Michael's badge tied him to a system of laws, protocols, and hierarchy, a system Cole was increasingly unsure he could trust. Before we start, Michael said, setting his badge on the table between them, this conversation never happened. I'm here as your friend, not as FBI. Cole nodded, then methodically walked Michael through his discoveries, the storage cabin, the trunk, Pierce's journals, the stone markers, and his strange experiences in the northern sector. He presented each piece of evidence with a ranger's attention to detail, deliberately avoiding interpretations, letting the facts speak for themselves. Michael listened without interruption, his expression shifting from polite skepticism to focused concentration. When Cole played the radio recording of his own voice discussing observations not yet made, Michael replayed it 3 times, each time leaning closer to the speaker. And you're certain this was your voice? He asked. Positive. Michael approached the wall display, studying the photographs of the stone markers and Pierce's annotated map. These symbols, they remind me of something. He pulled out his phone, scrolling through encrypted files before finding what he sought. Look at this. The phone displayed an internal FBI memo regarding unexplained phenomena in national parks. It's from a classified project called Forest Watch, Michael explained. Started in 2016 after a cluster of unusual disappearances in Olympic National Park. Most agents dismiss it as cryptid nonsense. But there's a serious investigation underneath. Cole scanned the document, his pulse quickening as he recognized descriptions matching Pierce's accounts. Time anomalies, equipment malfunctions, and visitors emerging from wilderness areas with impossible stories. The FBI created a small task force, Michael continued, cross-referencing similar incidents across all national parks and forests. Most cases end with rational explanations, but a small percentage remain classified as phenomenological anomalies. Your forest has one of the highest concentrations. You're saying the government knows about this? Some elements do. It's compartmentalized. Most field agents think it's just tracking environmental crimes or missing persons. But there's a deeper layer. Michael hesitated. Cole, some of these case files date back to the early 1900s. The same phenomena have been documented for over a century. Cole felt a cold certainty settle in his chest. The same people who sent the observation team in 1902. Michael nodded slowly. There's more. 2 months ago, I was denied access to certain historical records about this region. When I pressed for reasons, my supervisor said those files fall under a special classification protocol established in 1902, something called boundary contingency procedures. The phrase sent a shiver through Cole. That's exactly what Pierce called them in his later journals. This goes beyond folklore or ranger ghost stories, Michael said. Something happened in 1902 that the government has been monitoring and concealing ever since. They worked through the night. Michael's federal database access adding new dimensions to Cole's research. They identified patterns in equipment failures reported by research teams, clusters of missing time incidents and weather anomalies concentrated around the northern sector. Near dawn, Michael sat back rubbing his eyes. We need to see the stone circle for ourselves, and we need equipment better than your ranger gear. From his briefcase, Michael produced a small black case bearing no identification marks. Inside nested specialized devices, a thermal imager, an electromagnetic field detector, and what looked like a modified Geiger counter. Officially, these don't exist, he explained. They're developed for the task force to measure unconventional energy signatures. You're talking about scientific equipment to detect supernatural phenomena, Cole said flatly. Michael's expression remained carefully neutral. I'm talking about advanced instrumentation to document anomalies that current scientific frameworks don't adequately explain. Outside, pre-dawn light filtered through the trees. As they finalized plans for their expedition to the northern sector, a sound stopped them both, soft footsteps on Cole's porch. They exchanged glances, Michael's hand moving instinctively toward his sidearm. The steps paused outside the door, followed by silence. Then instead of a knock, an envelope slid beneath the door. Old-fashioned parchment sealed with wax, bearing the impression of a Forest Service badge from another era. The envelope contained a single page of brittle parchment, the handwriting precise yet hurried. The boundary weakens with the approaching equinox. If you seek answers, follow Pierce's final path. The Watchers are awakening. A friend could be a prank, Michael suggested, though his tone lacked conviction. No one knows about Pierce except us and Eleanor, Cole replied, studying the paper's texture. And this matches the stationery in the trunk. Dawn broke as they loaded Michael's SUV with both modern equipment and Pierce's artifacts. Cole called headquarters to request 3 days of personal leave, the first vacation time he'd taken in 5 years. Everything all right, Dawson? His supervisor asked, concern evident. Just some family business, Cole lied, disliking how easily the deception came. After 20 years of transparent service, secrets now accumulated around him like autumn leaves. They took Forest Road 22 as far as possible, then continued on foot toward the northern sector. Cole carried Pierce's journal, now a de facto guide, while Michael managed the specialized equipment. The day was unseasonably warm, the forest canopy filtering sunlight into dappled patterns that shifted as they walked. Your GPS working? Cole asked. As they approached the first boundary marker, Michael checked his device. Lost signal 10 minutes ago. He removed a small silver instrument from his pack. This should still function, though. It's designed to operate in electromagnetic disturbance zones. The device resembled a handheld radar, its digital display showing concentric rings. As they neared the marker Cole had discovered earlier, the display flickered, rings warping into spiral patterns. That's not supposed to happen, Michael muttered. Near the boundary stone, they unpacked additional sensors. Each instrument behaved erratically. Readings spiked, batteries drained inexplicably. Digital displays showed impossible values. Only Pierce's antique boundary detector functioned consistently, its brass pendulum swinging with steady purpose. While Michael documented the anomalies, Cole explored the surrounding area. Something glinted among the roots of an ancient pine, a tarnished metal object half buried in decades of forest debris. Carefully extracting it, Cole found himself holding a ranger's badge, the design matching Pierce's era. The name had worn away, but numbers on the reverse remained legible, 1647. As Cole turned the badge over in his palm, a series of images flashed through his mind. Unfamiliar hands pinning this badge to a uniform, trudging through these same woods in heavy boots. Standing before the stone circle under a full moon, the vision ended as abruptly as it began. leaving Cole disoriented. "Found something?" he called to Michael, his voice steadier than he felt. Michael photographed the badge in situ before Cole carefully stored it in an evidence bag. "This forest is a graveyard of lost rangers," Cole murmured, the sentiment feeling borrowed from someone else's thoughts. They continued north, following Pierce's map toward the stone circle. The forest grew denser, trees closer together than Cole remembered. Twice they had to backtrack when landmarks didn't match either modern maps or Pierce's charts, as if the landscape itself was shifting. "The topography shouldn't change this dramatically," Michael said, frustration evident as he compared their position to satellite imagery downloaded before their trip. "It's like we're walking through different versions of the same forest." By mid-afternoon, they reached a small clearing unmarked on any map. At its center lay a shallow depression containing a ranger's grave, a simple stone marker carved with the name Samuel Peterson, Range 1901. Fresh wildflowers lay atop the stone. "This shouldn't be here," Cole said, checking his maps again. "There's no record of a ranger burial site." Michael crouched by the grave. "Look at the flowers. Someone's been maintaining this." The discovery unsettled them both. They continued in silence, following Pierce's compass as the forest grew stranger. Trees twisted into unnatural shapes, undergrowth patterns that seemed to form and dissolve into recognizable symbols as they passed. Late afternoon brought them to another boundary marker where they discovered a hollow tree containing a weathered leather journal. Unlike Pierce's meticulous records, these pages contained frantic sketches and disjointed observations. They move when unobserved. "Time flows differently near the circles. Saw myself yesterday, watching myself today." And later, "The entities are not malevolent, but exist perpendicular to our reality. Our presence disrupts them as much as they disturb ours." The final entry chilled Cole. Pierce believes communication is possible. He's determined to cross over. God help him, I think he's right. The boundary isn't meant to separate worlds, but to allow controlled passage between them. The standing stones are not a barrier, but a door. The journal was signed simply Ranger Thomas Pierce's partner, June 1902, with a postscript. "If found, leave this for the next one who needs to understand." As daylight faded, they finally reached the stone circle. In the gathering dusk, the standing stones seemed to absorb the failing light, their surfaces darker than mere shadow could explain. Michael's instruments went completely dead. Even his flashlight flickered and died. Only Cole's old Ranger issue lamp still functioned, casting long shadows that seemed to move independently of the stones that cast them. "We should make camp," Cole suggested, fighting a growing urge to flee. "Document everything in daylight." As they set up their tent at the circle's edge, neither man mentioned how the stars overhead seemed wrong, constellations in impossible arrangements, pulsing with colors no stars should emit. Cole woke to find elaborate symbols carved into the trees surrounding their campsite, spiraling patterns that hadn't been there the night before. They glowed faintly in the dawn light, emitting a pale blue luminescence that faded as the sun rose higher. "I didn't hear anything," Michael said, photographing the markings with his backup camera, his primary equipment still non-functional. "No one could have done this without waking us." "Unless time worked differently while we slept," Cole suggested. Recalling Pierce's notes about temporal fluctuations, they found more symbols leading away from camp, a trail of glowing carvings pointing deeper into uncharted forest. Following them brought them to a smaller clearing containing a single stone, unlike the others. Roughly cube-shaped and standing waist-high, its surface was covered with intricate carvings, similar to those on the trees, but more complex, more deliberate. "It's some kind of communication," Michael said, running his hand over the symbols. As his fingers traced a particular spiral pattern, the stone vibrated subtly. Both men stepped back as a soft humming filled the air. The stone's surface shifted from grey to a deep blue-black that seemed to absorb rather than reflect light. "This wasn't in Pierce's journal," Cole whispered. Michael approached cautiously, instruments extended. It's emitting electromagnetic pulses in a regular pattern, almost like a heartbeat, Cole finished. Feeling the rhythm match his own pulse from his pack, Cole withdrew a rock sample he'd collected near the first boundary marker, a fragment with unusual green veining. On impulse, he placed it atop the cube-shaped stone. The humming intensified, and the stone's color shifted to match the sample's green streaks. "It's responding," Michael breathed. The stone began to pulse with light, projecting symbols into the air above it, three-dimensional glyphs that rotated slowly, casting no shadows despite their luminosity. Some resembled constellations, others mathematical equations beyond either man's comprehension. Cole felt drawn to touch the floating symbols. As his hand passed through one, a voice filled his mind, not heard but directly experienced, bypassing his ears. Observer recognized. Pattern continuity confirmed. Cole staggered back. "Did you hear that?" Michael shook his head, eyes wide with alarm. Your eyes changed color for a second. Before Cole could respond, the floating symbols reorganized, forming a map they both recognized, the forest, but with locations and pathways that existed on no official chart. One area pulsed with particular intensity, a location deeper in the northern sector. The communication stone, there was no other word for it, dimmed momentarily, then projected new symbols. These formed what appeared to be a timeline, marked with recognizable years: 1902, 1947, 1972, 2025. Each date pulsed in sequence. "It's showing us when the boundary opened, thinned," Cole guessed. Michael was frantically taking notes, his scientific training battling with obvious fear. "This technology isn't human." "Can't be. Not technology," Cole corrected, somehow certain. "It's direct manipulation of physical reality. The stone is a tool, not a machine." The projections abruptly collapsed as a high-pitched tone emanated from the stone. Cole felt pressure building in his head, a sense of urgency not his own. The stone's surface rippled like water, and within its depths, images formed. Rangers in antique uniforms, standing where they now stood. Researchers in mid-century clothing taking measurements. And most disturbingly, themselves watching this very scene, from multiple angles simultaneously. As if time were folded in on itself, Michael backed away, hands trembling. "We need to report this." "Call in specialists." "Government specialists?" Cole challenged. "The same people who've been covering this up for over a century. This is bigger than Forest Service ghost stories." Michael's voice rose with barely contained panic. "That thing is communicating across time. It's showing us people who haven't been here yet." The stone pulsed once more, then went dormant, its surface returning to ordinary grey granite. The forest fell unnaturally silent. "It stopped," Cole said unnecessarily. Michael checked his equipment. "Everything's dead. Even my backup camera." His professional composure cracked. "Cole, we're not equipped for this. Whatever's happening here isn't in any FBI manual." Cole felt strangely calm, despite everything they'd witnessed. "The stone was responding to me specifically. It called me observer, just like Pierce was an observer." "All the more reason to leave," Michael insisted. "You're being pulled into whatever happened to him. He chose to cross over," Cole reminded him, "and he never came back." Michael shouted, fear finally breaking through. "We need to go now." Cole stood his ground. "You go. Take what documentation we have." "I'm staying another night." Their argument escalated until Michael finally shouldered his pack. "This is a mistake. That thing isn't communicating. It's luring you in." "The Watchers have been here long before us," Cole said, the words feeling borrowed from another mind. "They're not malevolent. They're trying to understand us, just as we're trying to understand them." Michael's expression hardened. "You sound like you've been compromised." He reached for his sidearm. "I can't let you stay here alone." "Not in this condition." "I'm thinking more clearly than I have in years," Cole replied calmly. "The boundary is thinning, Michael. Someone needs to be here when it opens." Their standoff lasted several tense heartbeats before Michael lowered his weapon. 24 hours. "If you're not back at the ranger station by tomorrow noon, I'm bringing in a full team. Government secrets be damned." After Michael departed, Cole returned to the stone. In the fading afternoon light, he placed his hand directly on its surface. The connection was immediate and overwhelming. Visions of intertwined realities, beings of light moving through dimensions perpendicular to his own, and somewhere within it all, the distinct impression of Thomas Pierce watching from across an impossible divide. Darkness fell swiftly over the stone circle, shadows deepening until the boundary between forest and sky blurred. Cole sat cross-legged before the communication stone, Pierce's journal open in his lap. The camping lantern cast a feeble glow that seemed absorbed by the unnatural darkness surrounding the ancient monuments. According to Pierce's final entries, the equinox created optimal conditions for communication. The veil thins as celestial alignments occur, he'd written. The Watchers can reach through more easily then, and perhaps we can reach back. Cole had positioned himself at the circle's center, exactly where Pierce had drawn himself in his last documented observation. The stars above shifted in patterns no astronomer would recognize, constellations forming and dissolving, like thoughts taking shape then scattering. Shortly after midnight, the stones began to resonate with a low vibration Cole felt in his bones rather than heard. The communication stone pulsed with internal light, faint at first, then intensifying until blue-white luminescence outlined each carved symbol. "I'm here," Cole said aloud, feeling both foolish and right. "I'm observing, like Pierce did." The humming increased. The air between the standing stones seemed to thicken, taking on a gelatinous quality that distorted light. Cole's perception shifted, his vision extending beyond normal spectrum. Sounds becoming visible as rippling colors. From the corner of his eye, he caught movement, a luminous tendril of light extending from between two standing stones. It coalesced into a floating orb about the size of a baseball, pulsing with internal complexity. More appeared until 7 orbs hovered around the circle's perimeter. They moved with deliberate intelligence, weaving patterns in the air that left trails of light like phosphorescent ribbons. Cole remained motionless, heart racing but mind oddly calm. He was witnessing what Pierce had seen, the entities Pierce had called Watchers. The orbs converged above the communication stone, merging into a single larger sphere of swirling light. It descended slowly until it hovered at eye level. Within its depths, Cole saw impossible geometries and colors that shouldn't exist, constantly shifting and reforming. When it spoke, it wasn't with words, but with concepts that unfurled directly in Cole's consciousness. Observer. Continuity maintained. Integration possible. Cole felt himself responding without speaking. His thoughts somehow translated, "What are you?" "We are. You are." Distinction artificial. Images flooded Cole's mind, the forest existing simultaneously in multiple states, timelines stacked like transparent layers, and beings who moved perpendicular to normal reality. He understood the entities existed alongside human reality, but experienced it differently, perceiving time as a spatial dimension they could traverse at will. Why contact us? Cole managed to think coherently, despite the overwhelming sensory input, boundary maintenance, convergence approaching, observers needed. More concepts downloaded directly into Cole's awareness, understanding that certain locations, including this forest, existed at junctures between realities. These boundaries required maintenance from both sides. For centuries, certain humans had been recognized as suitable observers who could perceive the boundary conditions and assist in maintaining stability. Pierce hadn't disappeared. He had evolved, choosing to exist partially in the Watcher's reality to better serve as guardian of the boundary. Others had made similar choices throughout history. Cole saw them all, generations of sensitives drawn to these woods, some becoming rangers, others hermits or eccentric locals, all playing roles in preserving the delicate balance between worlds. Cole also perceived darker knowledge, government agencies that had discovered these boundaries and sought to exploit them, viewing them as potential weapons or intelligence advantages. Their clumsy interventions had damaged the natural integrity of the boundaries, requiring more active maintenance from the Watchers. The 1902 incident had been a governmental attempt to force a permanent opening between realities, an effort that nearly caused catastrophic collapse of both. Pierce and others had worked with the Watchers to seal the breach, then implemented the boundary contingency procedures to prevent future tampering. As this knowledge integrated into Cole's consciousness, the light orb pulsed brightly, then descended to touch his outstretched hand. On contact, it partially solidified into a crystalline structure that broke away from the main mass, a fragment of living light that continued to pulse with the same rhythms as its parent. Connection established. Observer linked. Return when called. The orb retreated, the others following in a spiraling dance before disappearing between the standing stones. Normal perception gradually returned, leaving Cole clutching the light fragment, solid yet impossibly lightweight, emitting a soft glow that responded to his thoughts, brightening when he focused on it. Dawn found Cole still seated at the circle's center, the light fragment resting in his palm. He felt fundamentally changed. His consciousness expanded beyond normal human parameters. The forest around him now appeared as multiple overlapping realities, flickers of alternative versions visible in his peripheral vision. Pierce's journal contained a final entry Cole had previously overlooked, written in a hand almost too small to read along the binding margin. To carry a piece of their world is to never fully belong to ours again. A fair exchange for the truth. Cole carefully placed the light fragment in his shirt pocket, where it nestled against his heart like a living thing. As he packed his gear, he realized with absolute certainty that his life as a conventional ranger had ended. A different kind of service to the forest had begun, one Pierce had chosen before him. Cole emerged from the forest near the ranger station just before noon, exactly 24 hours after Michael had left him. At least it had seemed like 24 hours to Cole. Michael's expression, a mixture of relief and shock, suggested otherwise. 3 days, Cole, Michael said, voice tight with tension. You've been gone 3 days. The ranger station parking lot contained 3 unmarked black SUVs. Men in dark suits conferred in small groups, occasionally glancing toward Cole with poorly disguised interest. Among them stood Cole's supervisor, Frank Tillman, looking deeply uncomfortable. We were about to send in a search party, Frank explained, avoiding direct eye contact. Agent Chen here insisted we wait until noon exactly. Michael pulled Cole toward his own vehicle, away from listening ears. What happened to you? And don't tell me you lost track of time. I didn't, Cole said calmly. Time moves differently near the boundary. I experienced one night. Here it was 3 days. Michael studied his friend's face. You looked different. Cole felt different. Colors appeared more vivid, sounds layered with meanings he'd never noticed before. Occasionally, his peripheral vision caught glimpses of transparent figures moving through the ranger station, echoes of people from other timelines occupying the same space. I made contact, Cole said simply. Inside Michael's SUV, Cole recounted his experiences, describing the light orbs, the communication, and the knowledge that had been transferred directly to his consciousness. Michael listened with growing concern. You realize how this sounds, he finally said. Mass hallucination is a documented phenomenon in certain electromagnetic fields. Your mind could have manufactured an explanation for unexplainable sensory experiences. I have proof, Cole replied. He reached into his shirt pocket and removed the light fragment. In daylight, it appeared less extraordinary. A crystalline structure with unusual green-blue coloration, roughly the size of a golf ball. Michael examined it skeptically. It's some kind of mineral formation. Unusual but natural. Watch, Cole instructed. He cupped the fragment in his palms and focused his thoughts. The crystal responded immediately, pulsing within a light that cast blue-white illumination across their faces. Michael jerked back. What the hell? It responds to consciousness, Cole explained. specifically to mine, since I'm now connected to them. Michael's FBI training reasserted itself. He pulled a small radiation detector from his jacket. Let me scan it. The device emitted a series of escalating beeps before its digital display scrambled, showing impossible readings before going completely dark. Just like all our other equipment near the stones, Cole noted. From his backpack, Cole produced his voice recorder. I recorded everything. My conversations with them, the sounds the stones made. Michael connected the recorder to his laptop. The playback began normally, with Cole's voice noting the time and location. Then came hours of what should have been Cole's one-sided conversation with the entities. Instead, they heard distorted electronic noises interspersed with fragments of Cole's voice. Not from that night, but from earlier recordings. Previous days, even conversations from years ago that Cole had no memory of recording. More disturbing were segments where Cole's voice described events that hadn't happened yet, mentioning people approaching the ranger station at that very moment, detailing their conversation word for word, seconds before Michael's phone rang with the call Cole had just described. Michael stared at the recorder. That's not possible. Their reality intersects with multiple points in our timeline, Cole explained, recalling the downloaded knowledge. The recorder captured temporal overlaps. Michael rewound the recording, listening again. The content had changed completely. Different voices, different events. As if the recording itself existed in multiple states simultaneously. This violates every law of physics, Michael whispered. Only the ones we know, Cole corrected. Outside, the men in suits were approaching Michael's vehicle. Their movement seemed oddly synchronized, too perfect to be natural. Cole noticed how ambient light bent subtly around them, as if they distorted reality in small ways. They're not all human, Cole said quietly. Some are influenced. The government has been studying the boundaries for decades. They've been affected by prolonged exposure. That's paranoia talking, Michael replied, though uncertainty tinged his voice. Check their records, Cole suggested. The ones on the left, Thompson and Miller, according to their IDs, they've been assigned to boundary research since the 70s, but they haven't aged appropriately. The reports are buried, but they exist. Michael's expression shifted from skepticism to unease. How could you possibly know their names? Or their service records? Cole touched the light fragment gently. I know what they know. Parts of it, anyway. The connection works both ways. A sharp rap on the window interrupted them. Frank Tillman stood outside, flanked by two of the suited men. Cole, these gentlemen from the Department of Interior need to debrief you about your experience. Standard procedure for extended disappearances in federal lands. Cole met Michael's eyes. They'll want the recordings. And the fragment. What are you going to do? Cole pocketed the light fragment, feeling it pulse against his chest in synchronization with his heartbeat. Tell them enough to satisfy protocol. Nothing about what really happened. As Cole stepped out of the vehicle, he noticed how the suited men flinched almost imperceptibly when the sunlight reflected off the fragment through his shirt pocket. They knew what it was. They'd seen its kind before. Just a routine statement, the taller man said, voice professionally neutral. Only Cole noticed the subtle distortion around him, the slight echo effect, as if his words existed in multiple temporal planes simultaneously. Of course, Cole replied calmly, though there's really nothing to report. Just got turned around in the woods. The light fragment warmed against his chest. A silent reminder of truths now living within him that these men, these partial men, would never fully comprehend. The debriefing lasted 5 hours. Cole provided a sanitized account of getting lost while investigating wildlife patterns, carefully omitting any mention of the stones, the watchers, or his newfound awareness. The government agents, introducing themselves as special consultants from the Department of Interior, asked pointed questions about equipment malfunctions and temporal disorientation, revealing their familiarity with boundary phenomena without explicitly acknowledging it. When they finally released him, night had fallen. Michael waited in his SUV at the edge of the parking lot. They followed a script, Cole said as he climbed in. Asked specific questions about things I never mentioned. They know more than they're saying, Michael agreed. I made some calls. Those men aren't officially assigned anywhere. Their credentials lead to administrative black holes. Cole nodded, unsurprised. We need to find Samuel Blackwood, the ranger mentioned in Pierce's later journals. He was part of the 1972 incident, what Pierce called a containment breach. According to the records Eleanor showed me, he retired early on medical grounds, but never left the area. Michael hesitated. Cole, are you sure you're yourself? Since the Stones, you're different. Knowing things you shouldn't know, seeing things that aren't there. Cole met his friend's concerned gaze. I'm more myself than I've ever been, just expanded. He felt the light fragment pulse gently against his chest, a reminder of his connection to something larger than human understanding. Blackwood's cabin sat at the edge of town on 3 overgrown acres backing against national forest land. No lights shone from within, but smoke curled from the stone chimney. As they approached the porch, Cole noticed protective symbols carved into the doorframe, identical to those he'd seen near the stone. Their knock was answered by the metallic click of a shotgun being cocked. Whatever you're selling, I don't want it, called a gruff voice from within. We're not selling anything, Mr. Blackwood, Cole replied. We're here about Ranger Pierce and the 1972 boundary event. Silence stretched for nearly a minute before the door opened a crack, revealing a weathered face beneath wild white hair. One roomy eye studied them suspiciously before widening in recognition, not of their faces, but of something else. You've been touched by them, Blackwood said, his gaze fixed on Cole's chest, where the fragment rested beneath his shirt. You poor bastard. The cabin's interior was a testament to obsession. Walls covered with maps spanning decades, each marked with identical symbols in different locations. Glass cases displayed artifacts resembling those Cole had found, boundary detectors, unusual stones, and journals with faded handwriting. Newspaper clippings documented unexplained phenomena dating back to the 1930s. Blackwood moved with difficulty, leaning heavily on a walking stick, unlike any Cole had seen, dark wood spiraling up its length, carved with protective symbols and inlaid with materials that glinted unnaturally in the firelight. Burn marks scarred its lower half, the wood charred almost to charcoal in places. 43 years I've waited, Blackwood said, lowering himself into a worn armchair, wondering if anyone else would see them, would believe. He tapped his walking stick against the floor. Then you show up carrying their light? History repeats. You were there in 1972, Cole prompted, when the government tried to force the boundary open. Blackwood's laugh held no humor. Project Threshold, they called it. Very scientific, very controlled, absolute disaster. He shook his head. They thought the boundaries were doorways to other physical places, Russia maybe, or China. A Cold War advantage. Idiots didn't understand they were messing with the fabric of reality itself. What happened? Michael asked. They brought machines, set them up at 7 boundary points simultaneously, tried to amplify what they called natural quantum tunneling. Instead, they tore holes. Blackwood's eyes unfocused, seeing something decades past. The Watchers came through all at once then, not just observing, but physically manifesting. Light beings walking among us. He gripped his walking stick tighter. Some government men were taken, just gone, replaced by echoes that looked human, but weren't quite right. Others were burned from the inside by touching what shouldn't be touched. He raised the stick slightly. This saved me. Old Joe from the reservation made it for me years before. Said I'd need it someday. The cover-up. Cole prompted. Total. Classified beyond top secret. They brought in specialists to close the tiers. Physics professors who worked with theories no university would publish. Called it reality stabilization. Meanwhile, they told the public it was just a forest fire. Blackwood leaned forward, fixing Cole with a penetrating stare. But you know the real reason they could seal it, don't you? The Watchers helped them. The boundaries aren't meant to be permanently crossed in either direction. Destabilizes both sides. Cole nodded, understanding flowing from knowledge that wasn't entirely his. The Watchers exist perpendicular to our reality. They need the boundaries intact as much as we do. Exactly. Blackwood slapped his knee. But now the boundaries are thinning again. Natural cycle happens every 50 years or so. That's why they've given you that. He pointed to Cole's chest, where the fragment lay hidden. You're being recruited, same as Pierce was. Recruited for what? Michael asked. To help maintain the boundaries, Cole answered before Blackwood could. To be an observer on our side, Blackwood nodded grimly. The government men are back too. Different faces, same purpose. They still don't understand what they're messing with. He handed Cole his walking stick. Take it, I'm too old for boundary work now. The symbols will protect you when the time comes. As Cole's fingers closed around the carved wood, images flashed through his mind. Blackwood as a young ranger facing entities of pure light. The walking stick blazing with protective energy. Government men screaming as they dissolved into luminous particles. They're coming for you next, Blackwood warned. The fragment marks you. They have instruments that can detect its energy signature. You're a danger to their narrative. A ranger who's seen the truth and might tell others. What should I do? Cole asked. Blackwood's expression was grave. Exactly what Pierce did. Disappear into the deep forest. The boundaries are thinnest there. The Watchers will find you. His gnarled hand gripped Cole's arm with surprising strength. Trust them before you trust any man in a black suit. Their agenda is older and wiser than any government. Cole noticed the surveillance within 24 hours of meeting Blackwood. A black SUV parked 2 blocks from his cabin, rotating personnel in 8-hour shifts. His landline emitted subtle clicks indicating monitoring. At the ranger station, new environmental researchers had taken over the conference room. Their equipment aimed toward the northern sector. They're not even trying to be subtle, Michael observed as they spoke in the town diner, deliberately choosing the noisiest corner booth. Something's accelerated their timeline, Cole nodded. With his enhanced perception, he noticed details others missed. How the researchers' equipment included devices that measured energy signatures matching the light fragment. How certain researchers moved with military precision beneath their civilian clothing. The equinox is in 3 days, Cole said quietly. The boundary will reach maximum permeability. Their conversation paused as Frank Tillman entered the diner, spotted them, and approached with obvious reluctance. Dark circles underlined his eyes, his normally pressed uniform showing uncharacteristic wrinkles. Cole, he said, sliding into the booth. We need to talk about the Department of Interior taking over my station. Cole asked. Frank winced. They've pulled my access to the Northern Sector reports. 20 years as district supervisor, and suddenly I don't have clearance for my own forest. He leaned closer. They're going through your files, your patrol reports. Asked specifically about any unusual observations you might have documented over the years. What did you tell them? That you're the most reliable ranger I've ever worked with. Frank's expression darkened. Then they showed me something I couldn't explain. Satellite thermal imaging of your movements during those 3 days you were lost. You appeared and disappeared repeatedly. Cole, like you were blinking in and out of existence. Cole felt the light fragment warm against his chest, responding to his anxiety. Frank's gaze dropped to Cole's shirt pocket, where a faint glow now seeped through the fabric. What have you gotten yourself into? Frank whispered. Before Cole could answer, the diner's door opened again. A man in a crisp suit entered, surveying the room with calculated precision before his gaze locked onto their booth. Cole recognized him immediately, the lead agent from his debriefing. We should go, Michael murmured. Outside, they parted ways with Frank, who squeezed Cole's shoulder with unspoken concern before heading to his truck. As Cole and Michael walked toward the Forest Service parking lot, the agent followed at a careful distance. He's not trying to catch us, Michael noted. He's letting us know we're being watched. When they reached Cole's truck, they found it surrounded by more dark-suited men, examining it with handheld devices. One instrument, a sleek black rectangle with a digital display, beeped rapidly when pointed at the driver's door. The agent nodded to his colleagues, who began taking photographs and samples from the door handle. They're tracking the energy signature, Cole realized. Everything I've touched since contacting the Watchers leaves a trace they can detect. Back at Cole's cabin, the situation worsened. His door stood slightly ajar, interior lights blazing despite him having left them off. Inside, evidence of a methodical search confronted them. Cushions replaced at slightly wrong angles, books on shelves subtly rearranged, floorboards showing recent disturbance. Most alarmingly, Cole's computer screen displayed his desktop despite being password protected. When he checked his files, he found his personal journals had been accessed. Folders containing his private ranger observations opened. On the kitchen table sat a single object that made Cole's blood run cold. A small black dashboard camera, its lens oriented toward the room's center. A tiny red light indicating active recording. The camera's sleek government-issue design marked it as no ordinary surveillance device. "They're not even pretending to follow legal protocols," Michael said, voice tight with controlled anger. "This is way beyond normal federal overreach." Cole approached the camera, studying it without touching it. "It's not just recording video," he observed, noting unusual components visible through its casing. "It's scanning for energy signatures." His phone rang. Eleanor Jenkins, her voice uncharacteristically tense. "Cole, men were here asking about you. Wanted to know what materials I'd shared from the Historical Society. They had badges, but," she paused, "they didn't feel right. Their eyes were wrong somehow. Did they take anything?" Cole asked. "No, but they photographed everything related to the early Forest Service. And they knew things, Cole. Asked about specific documents I've never shown anyone. After assuring Eleanor he'd check on her soon, Cole hung up to find Michael staring at his laptop screen. "You need to see this," he said grimly. Michael had accessed secure FBI databases through his credentials. On screen was a classified memo titled Operation Forest Watch, Subject Surveillance Authorization. Cole's name appeared prominently, alongside a designation that chilled him. Potential CU-73 contamination, Level 4 monitoring approved. CU-73 is the classification code for non-human contact scenarios, Michael explained quietly. Level 4 means they consider you compromised by foreign influence. Cole touched Blackwood's walking stick, which he'd kept close since their meeting. "They're not wrong," he admitted. "I am changed, but not compromised." Outside, more black SUVs pulled up to the dirt road leading to his cabin. Men in tactical gear deployed in a perimeter formation, communications equipment glinting in the afternoon sun. "They're done watching," Michael said. "Now they're coming for you." "There's a back way," Cole said, grabbing his emergency pack, always ready, a ranger's habit. He slung Pierce's journals and the most critical letters into the bag as Michael disabled the surveillance camera. The cabin's rear exit led to a narrow game trail invisible from the main road. Cole had mapped every hidden path in his territory over 2 decades. Now that knowledge offered their only advantage. "They'll have thermal scanning," Michael warned as they slipped into the dense forest. "Standard procedure for high-priority containment. The boundary distorts those readings," Cole replied. "If we reach the first marker, their technology becomes useless." They moved swiftly through deepening shadows as the forest closed around them. Cole navigated with uncanny precision, choosing paths that shouldn't exist on any map. His enhanced senses detected government teams deploying in standard search patterns throughout the forest, all in exactly the wrong locations. After 2 hours of punishing pace, they reached the first boundary marker. The stone's carved spirals seemed more pronounced than before, faintly luminous in the gathering dusk. "We're officially off-grid," Cole said. "Conventional tracking won't work within the influence radius of these markers." Michael checked his phone. No signal. "GPS is scrambled." He studied Cole with professional assessment. "You've changed even more. Your eyes, they reflect light differently." Cole didn't answer. The boundary was calling to him, a subtle pressure drawing him northward. The light fragment in his pocket pulsed with increasing intensity, synchronized with his heartbeat. They made camp in a hidden ravine, Cole selecting the location with instinctive certainty. From his pack, he retrieved Pierce's field journal, turning to pages he hadn't fully examined before. Among routine observations and sketched maps were coded passages written in a substitution cipher. Pierce was hiding information even within his private journals. Cole murmured. With newfound intuition, guided by his connection to the Watchers, Cole deciphered the code almost effortlessly. The decoded text revealed precise coordinates, not standard longitude and latitude, but measurements based on the positions of the boundary stones relative to celestial alignments. He created a navigation system independent of conventional mapping, Cole explained. Coordinates that work even when reality becomes fluid near the boundaries. The decoded message included a final set of coordinates labeled simply Sanctuary. Pierce had written beneath it, "Where those who see can safely witness the crossing." While Michael slept, Cole spread the map before him and placed Pierce's strange compass at its center. The device spun wildly before settling on a direction that matched none of the cardinal points. Cole recognized it immediately. The bearing pointed directly toward Pierce's sanctuary coordinates. The light fragment glowed brightly enough now to illuminate the map without additional light. As Cole studied the parchment, hidden markings appeared under the fragments. Illumination, invisible ink, or perhaps writing that existed in a spectrum ordinary humans couldn't perceive. These newly revealed notes detailed a network of caves beneath the northern ridge, natural formations, expanded by early rangers to create safe observation points near major boundary intersections. According to Pierce, these caves were shielded from both conventional detection and the more disruptive effects of boundary phenomena. Perfect hiding places, Cole whispered to himself. At dawn, they continued north, Cole following a mental map that overlaid Pierce's coordinates with his own ranger's knowledge of the terrain. The forest grew increasingly strange, trees bending at impossible angles, rock formations that seemed to shift position when viewed peripherally, streams that flowed both uphill and down simultaneously. By mid-afternoon, they reached a waterfall not marked on any official map. Behind its curtain of water, just as Pierce's notes indicated, a narrow opening led to a cave system extending deep into the mountain. The water disrupts energy signatures, Cole explained as they slipped inside. Natural electromagnetic interference. It's why they've never found these places despite decades of searching. The cave widened into a series of chambers dry enough to serve as shelter. Ancient lanterns still hung from iron hooks in the rock walls, their oil long evaporated. More surprising were the provisions, sealed containers of emergency supplies dated from various decades, the most recent from the early 2000s. Others have used this place, Michael realized. Recently, Cole nodded. Boundary observers throughout the years. This has been a continuous operation outside government knowledge. In the largest chamber, they discovered a stone table carved with the now familiar spiral patterns. At its center sat a metal box, locked with no visible keyhole. Cole felt drawn to place the light fragment against its surface. The box responded immediately, mechanisms clicking as the lid unsealed itself. Inside lay a single sheet of parchment covered in precise handwriting, coordinates and dates going back decades, each accompanied by observer initials. The most recent entry was dated just 3 months earlier. Signed S.B., Samuel Blackwood, but it was another set of coordinates that caught Cole's attention, those for the upcoming equinox 3 days hence. They pointed to a location deeper in the northern sector than Cole had ever ventured, marked with a single annotation in Pierce's handwriting, Primary Threshold. This is it, Cole said, certainty filling him. The main crossing point, where Pierce went through. Michael studied the coordinates with growing unease. It's also where the government teams are converging. I saw their deployment maps on the classified server. Whatever they're planning, it centers on this exact location. Cole carefully folded the parchment and placed it in his pocket alongside the light fragment. Then that's where we need to be. The boundary is weakening. If they try another forced opening like in 72 or 1902, He left the consequences unspoken. You're not just running from them anymore, Michael realized. You're planning to stop them. Cole's expression remained calm, but his eyes reflected an otherworldly light. The Watchers chose me for a reason, just like they chose Pierce and others before him. Some boundaries weren't meant to be broken, not by us, not by them. The day before, the equinox brought ominous changes to the forest. Cole woke to find the cave entrance crawling with luminous patterns, geometric shapes forming and dissolving like mathematical equations written in light. Outside, wildlife behaved erratically. Herds of deer ran south in panicked formation. Birds circled in perfect geometric patterns before abandoning their nests and fleeing. Mass migration, Cole noted as they observed from a concealed ridge. They sensed the boundary thinning. From their vantage point, they spotted government activity below, teams establishing a perimeter around the area marked as the primary threshold on Pierce's map. Workers in hazmat suits unloaded equipment from heavy trucks, erecting what appeared to be scientific instruments around a natural clearing. Cole removed a small device from his pack that Blackwood had given him, a handheld electromagnetic anomaly detector with technology decades ahead of its apparent age. Unlike standard EMF readers, this one measured disturbances across multiple frequency bands simultaneously. Designed specifically for boundary phenomena, the detector's needle swung wildly, its digital display showing readings that fluctuated between impossibly high numbers and negative values. According to its measurements, the boundary between realities was already becoming dangerously thin. It's happening faster than Pierce predicted, Cole said. The equinox is accelerating the natural cycle. Through binoculars, they observed the government operation more closely. At the center of their activity stood a circle of 7 metallic pylons, arranged precisely like the ancient standing stones, but clearly incorporating advanced technology. Cables ran from each pylon to a central control station where technicians made adjustments under the supervision of the dark-suited men Cole now recognized as long-term boundary researchers. They're creating an artificial version of the stone circle, Cole realized, trying to mechanically control the boundary crossing. Michael photographed the operation with a long-range lens. Those components look military-grade, but I don't recognize the configuration. Because it's not entirely human technology, Cole replied, certainty flowing from his expanded awareness. They've adapted concepts from previous boundary events, reverse-engineered them. By mid-afternoon, clouds gathered above the site in unnatural formations, perfect spirals and concentric rings that meteorological phenomena should not create. The air shimmered with heat-like distortions despite the cool temperature. Occasionally, after images lingered when people moved, as if reality couldn't quite keep up with their movements. The anomaly detector's readings continued to climb. Cole felt the light fragment growing warmer against his chest, pulsing with increasing urgency. His perception kept shifting, moments of seeing through the veil to what existed perpendicular to normal reality. Glimpses of the Watchers observing from their side. As evening approached, the government team activated their equipment. The pylons hummed with power, emitting a blue-white glow reminiscent of the Watchers themselves. Sensors on tripods recorded data, while technicians made adjustments based on readings. The operation had the practiced precision of something they'd done before. They're not just observing, Michael said grimly. They're actively trying to manipulate the boundary. Forcing it open, Cole agreed. Just like in 72 and 1902, lightning cracked overhead, unnatural bolts that branched in perfect fractal patterns and lingered too long in the air. The clearing below filled with a diffuse glow as reality itself began to thin. Through his enhanced perception, Cole saw the fabric of existence stretching like an over-tightened membrane, areas becoming translucent enough to reveal the complex geometries of the Watcher's realm beyond. The government teams appeared unaware of the danger they were creating. Their instruments measured only what they were designed to detect, Energy fluctuations, radiation levels, electromagnetic anomalies, missing the fundamental disruption to reality itself. They don't understand, Cole whispered. They're measuring pieces of the phenomenon without comprehending the whole. As darkness fell, the operation intensified. The pylon's glow strengthened, creating a dome of light over the clearing. Within this dome, temporal effects became visible even to normal human perception. People moving at slightly different speeds, objects appearing briefly in multiple positions simultaneously. We need to get closer, Cole decided. See exactly what they're attempting. They circled through the forest, using Cole's enhanced senses to avoid patrols. Reaching the perimeter, they concealed themselves behind a natural rock formation with a clear view of the central operation. The control station buzzed with activity as technicians monitored screens showing incomprehensible data patterns. At the center stood a device Cole instantly recognized from Blackwood's descriptions, a boundary sealing mechanism designed to permanently close or redirect crossing points. "That's not observation equipment," Michael whispered. "That's a weapon." Cole's blood ran cold. "They're not trying to study the boundary. They're trying to permanently seal it, or worse, redirect it for their exclusive control." The anomaly detector in Cole's hand suddenly emitted a high-pitched whine before going silent, its display showing nothing but zeros. Above the clearing, the unnatural storm intensified. Lightning connected the pylons in a perfect heptagram pattern as reality visibly thinned. Through the transparent membrane between worlds, Cole saw them clearly now, the Watchers gathering in unprecedented numbers, their luminous forms moving with urgent purpose. The light fragment against his chest burned hot enough to be painful, its pulsing now a continuous glow. A technician shouted triumphantly as his monitor displayed a successful reading. The pylons intensified their output, the boundary between worlds stretching dangerously thin. Cole could see both sides now, the government operation and the Watchers' response. Two realities overlapping in the same space, and then it tore, a small rent at first. Reality parting like fabric under too much tension. Light poured through from the other side. Not the gentle luminescence of the Watchers' normal manifestations, but the raw, unfiltered energy of their realm. The technicians cheered, unaware of what they'd truly done. They hadn't created a controlled opening. They'd caused a breach that neither side could contain. Chaos erupted as the breach widened. Government technicians scrambled to contain what they'd unleashed, frantically adjusting equipment as alarms blared across their stations. The tear in reality expanded, edges rippling like heat distortions, revealing glimpses of impossible geometries beyond. "We need to leave," Michael urged, pulling at Cole's arm. "Now." But Cole stood transfixed, watching as light entities poured through the breach, not the measured, controlled manifestations he'd witnessed before, but desperate, fleeing forms. The Watchers were evacuating their side of the boundary. From the government's equipment, a high-pitched whine built to painful intensity. The pylons discharged crackling energy in an attempt to close the breach, but their efforts only distorted it further. Reality buckled around the clearing, objects briefly existing in multiple states simultaneously, solid and transparent, present and absent. Three of the suited men Cole had recognized as long-term researchers approached the breach directly, extending instruments on long poles. As they neared the tear, their forms blurred, outlines becoming indistinct, as if reality couldn't quite decide which version of them should exist. Through the widening gap came something different, a luminous figure more defined than the Watchers. With an almost human shape, it moved with purpose toward the government team, trailing streamers of light that cut through normal space like blades. The researchers retreated in obvious panic. Cole felt an overwhelming pull toward the breach. The light fragment in his pocket now burned white-hot, vibrating with such intensity he had to remove it. In his palm, it pulsed in complex patterns, not random but a deliberate communication. "They're calling for help," Cole realized. From his other pocket, he withdrew a small stone disc he'd found in the sanctuary cave, an ancient artifact carved with the same spiral patterns as the boundary stones. The disc was warm to the touch, despite the cool night air, its carvings now glowing with the same blue-white luminescence as the Watchers. "What is that?" Michael asked, voice barely audible over the escalating chaos. "A Guardian token," Cole replied, knowledge flowing into him from beyond, a symbol of trust between realities. Before Michael could respond, a shockwave rippled outward from the breach. Government equipment shorted out in cascades of sparks. Personnel were thrown to the ground. Only Cole remained standing, the Guardian token in his hand somehow anchoring him against the reality distortion. The humanoid light being approached Cole directly, moving through the government's defensive perimeter as if it weren't there. Up close, its form resolved into something both familiar and alien, a luminous silhouette that Cole somehow recognized despite having never seen it before. "Pierce," he whispered. The entity paused, its light dimming slightly in confirmation. Though it had no discernible face, Cole felt its focus on the token in his hand. Knowledge transferred directly to his consciousness, Guardian transition necessary. Boundary collapsing. Both realities threatened. The entity, the transformed Ranger Pierce, extended what might have been a hand. Within it materialized another token, identical to the one Cole held, but composed of pure light rather than stone. "Accept guardianship. Restore balance," Cole understood with sudden clarity. Pierce hadn't simply disappeared or crossed over. He had become a guardian, existing between realities to help maintain the boundaries. Now the cycle was repeating, with Cole being offered the same choice. Behind Pierce, more entities gathered at the breach, some with the fluid, abstract forms of natural Watchers, others with the more defined shapes of previous human guardians. They were the missing Rangers, researchers, and indigenous people who had disappeared throughout centuries, each choosing to serve as bridges between worlds. The government forces were regrouping, bringing more equipment online. A suited man shouted orders as technicians aimed devices toward Pierce and the breach. "They're trying to capture them," Michael realized. "Or destroy them." Cole stepped forward, Guardian token raised. "I need to help them." Michael grabbed his shoulder. "Cole, think about what you're doing. If you cross that boundary—" "I'm not crossing," Cole corrected. "I'm standing between." The light fragment and stone token in Cole's hands began to merge, materials flowing together in defiance of physical laws. The resulting object was neither fully solid nor fully energy, a disk of stone veined with living light, warm and cool simultaneously, heavy yet weightless. As Cole accepted this transformed token, knowledge flooded his consciousness, the full history of the boundaries, the ancient pact between realities, the role of human guardians who stood watch alongside the Watchers. He saw the pattern of selection across generations, individuals whose minds could expand to perceive multiple realities simultaneously. Pierce's luminous form nodded in approval, then gestured toward the government operation with urgency. Cole understood immediately. Their attempt to mechanically seal or control the boundary threatened both worlds. The natural flow between realities maintained cosmic balance. Artificial manipulation risked collapse of both sides. With the Guardian token now part of him, Cole's perception expanded exponentially. He saw the forest existing across multiple timelines simultaneously, the boundary stones as nexus points anchoring reality, and the delicate membrane between worlds that had evolved over millennia to allow controlled interaction rather than isolation. Most critically, he saw the government's true plan, not just to close this breach, but to redirect the boundary's energy toward locations they controlled. Their equipment wasn't designed for research or containment, but for harvesting, for weaponizing the power that flowed between realities. "They don't understand what they're doing," Cole told Michael, his voice resonating oddly, as if speaking from multiple positions simultaneously. "This isn't just about our forest or even our world. The boundaries are load-bearing walls in the structure of existence itself." Michael stared at him, clearly seeing the changes the Guardian token had wrought. Cole's outline now blurred slightly at the edges, his eyes reflecting light that came from nowhere in this reality. "What are you going to do?" Michael asked. Cole tightened his grip on Blackwood's walking stick, feeling its protective symbols activate in response to his transformed awareness. "What Guardians have always done. Maintain balance, protect the boundaries, ensure both sides survive." He stepped toward the breach, the walking stick extended before him, its symbols glowing in counterpoint to the government's artificial pylons. Pierce and the other Guardians moved to flank him as they faced the forces that threatened the natural order of realities. The government team reacted immediately to Cole's approach, security personnel drawing weapons, while technicians hurriedly activated defensive measures. At the center of their operation stood the device Cole now recognized as their most dangerous creation. A boundary-sealing device, unlike anything attempted before. The machine resembled a sophisticated particle accelerator miniaturized into a portable unit. Its central chamber contained swirling energy that shifted between states of matter, neither fully solid, nor liquid, nor gas, but something that existed between definitions. Cables connected it to the artificial pylons, channeling boundary energy into its containment field. "Subject Dawson has been compromised," shouted the lead agent, his voice distorted by reality fluctuations. "Containment Protocol 7. Michael positioned himself between Cole and the government forces. "Federal Agent Chen, stand down. You don't understand what you're dealing with." Cole placed a hand on Michael's shoulder. "They can't hear you." Not really. His perception, enhanced by the Guardian token, revealed the truth. Many of the agents had been subtly altered by prolonged boundary exposure, their consciousness partially replaced by echoes from other realities, following protocols without truly understanding them. The boundary-sealing device powered up with a high-pitched whine, its central chamber pulsing with unnatural light. The artificial pylons redirected its energy toward the breach, attempting to force it closed through brute technological intervention. Pierce's luminous form communicated urgently to Cole. "Device will destabilize both sides. Natural closure required? Guardians must guide." Cole understood. The boundary needed to be sealed, but gently, following the natural contours of reality rather than forcing it. Like setting a broken bone. Alignment before healing. "I need to get to the device," Cole told Michael. "Disable it before they make things worse." Michael nodded grimly. "I'll create a diversion." As Michael circled left, drawing security personnel with his FBI credentials and loud demands, Cole moved directly toward the boundary sealing device. The government technicians, focused on their readings, didn't immediately notice his approach. The lead researcher, a thin man with eyes that reflected light oddly, looked up from the control panel. Recognition flashed across his face. "You're the Ranger. The one who found Pierce's records. You know what happened in 1902, Cole said. And 1972, you're making the same mistake again." "Mistake?" The man smiled thinly. "Those were learning experiences. We've refined the process. This time we'll succeed in doing what? Controlling the flow between worlds. Directing it where we choose, when we choose." He gestured toward the breach. "Your precious watchers have hoarded this power for millennia. Imagine what humanity could accomplish with controlled access to alternate realities." "It's not meant to be controlled," Cole countered. "The boundaries exist for protection, theirs and ours." The researcher's expression hardened. "Typical Ranger mentality. Always about preservation, never progress." He turned to the security team. "Remove him." As guards approached, Cole felt the Guardian token pulse against his chest. Time seemed to slow around him, giving him a moment to examine the boundary sealing device more closely. Its design incorporated elements stolen from both human and Watcher technology. Complex circuits merged with crystalline structures similar to the light fragment he'd received. Most crucially, at its core sat a control mechanism that didn't belong. A crystalline disk about 6 inches in diameter, covered in etched symbols, identical to those on the boundary stones. This was no human technology, but a Guardian artifact. Repurposed and corrupted for the government's aims, the disk pulsed with sickly yellow light, its natural blue-white luminescence perverted by the machine harnessing it. Cole recognized it instantly, an ancient boundary key, one of the original tools used by Guardians to regulate flow between worlds. As security personnel reached for him, Cole moved with newfound grace, stepping between them as if occupying spaces they couldn't quite perceive. He placed his hands directly on the boundary sealing device, fingers finding the access panel, protecting the corrupted boundary key. Alarms blared. The lead researcher shouted orders. Reality itself seemed to protest, air shimmering around the machine as Cole worked to extract the boundary key. Pierce and the other light entities gathered around the breach, forming a containment pattern with their bodies. They couldn't directly interact with the physical world, but their presence stabilized the tier, preventing further expansion while Cole worked. With a final twist, the access panel gave way. The boundary key pulsed erratically, its corrupted energy fighting Cole's touch. Unlike the Guardian token, which had accepted and transformed him, this ancient artifact had been forced into service against its nature. As Cole's fingers closed around it, pain shot through his system, the boundary key's corrupted energy fighting his Guardian resonance. Through gritted teeth, he pulled it free from its housing. The boundary sealing device sputtered and died. The artificial pylons lost their power source, their unnatural glow fading. Government personnel scrambled to reroute systems, but without the boundary key, their technology was useless. The corrupted key burned in Cole's hands, its yellowish light fighting the blue-white resonance of his Guardian token, two opposing forces of the same fundamental energy, one perverted for control, one attuned to natural balance. Pierce's form approached, extending what might have been hands toward the corrupted key. Restoration possible. Combine energies, Cole understood. He brought the Guardian token and boundary key together, allowing their energies to interact. The process was agonizing, raw power flowing through his human form as the artifacts communicated, the uncorrupted Guardian energy gradually reharmonizing the boundary key's distorted patterns. The lead researcher watched in horrified fascination. "Do you have any idea what you're doing? That technology took decades to develop." "It's not technology," Cole replied, voice strained as the artifacts merged in his hands. "It's part of a living system. You can't control it any more than you can control gravity or time." The boundary key's sickly yellow light gradually shifted toward blue-white as its natural resonance was restored. As it aligned with its true purpose, the key began to sing, a crystalline tone that vibrated at frequencies human ears could barely detect. In response, the boundary stones throughout the forest awakened, ancient carvings glowing with renewed purpose. The tear in reality pulsed in rhythm with the key's song, its jagged edges beginning to smooth, the natural healing process beginning. The government forces watched in impotent rage as their years of research and planning unraveled before them. Their equipment, designed to force and control, had no power against the boundary's natural self-healing capacity once properly guided. Through the pain of channeling forces never meant for human conduction, Cole smiled at the researcher. "You never understood. The boundaries don't need to be controlled. They need to be respected." Morning light filtered through the trees as the last of the government vehicles departed. Their equipment had been hastily packed, research notes confiscated, personnel debriefed with carefully constructed explanations that mentioned nothing of light beings or reality breaches. Official reports would describe a failed experimental weather monitoring system, nothing more. Cole watched from the ridgeline, his perception now permanently altered. He saw not just the physical world, but the layered realities that intersected with it, ghostly impressions of what had been, what might be, and what existed perpendicular to normal human experience. The forest he'd patrolled for 20 years now revealed its full complexity, a living tapestry of interconnected dimensions. Michael approached, fatigue evident in his movements. "They're establishing a containment narrative. Classified everything under national security protocols. He shook his head. By next week, even the people who were here won't remember exactly what happened. But you will, Cole said. Yes. Michael studied his friend's changed appearance. Cole's physical form remained human, but something fundamental had shifted. A subtle luminescence to his skin, eyes that sometimes reflected light from sources not in this reality. And you? What happens to you now? Cole removed his ranger badge, turning it over in his palm. The brass shield caught the morning light, reflecting his transformed face back at him. Unlike the standard issue, his badge now bore subtle alterations, visible only to his enhanced perception. Microscopic spirals etched into the metal, resonating with the same energy as the boundary stones. I'm still a ranger, Cole said, reattaching the badge to his shirt. Just with expanded responsibilities. The restored boundary key and guardian token had merged during the healing of the breach, transforming into something new that now resided partly within Cole's physical form and partly in the adjacent reality. He could feel it as a warm presence centered in his chest, extending tendrils of awareness throughout his being. Will you stay here in the human world? Michael asked carefully. Pierce did, for years after his initial contact. The best guardians maintain connections to both sides. Cole gazed toward the northern sector, where the boundary stones now glowed with renewed purpose, visible to his sight alone. The Watchers need representatives who understand human perspective, just as humans need someone who comprehends the boundaries. They walked together toward the stone circle, now restored to its natural state. The government's artificial pylons had been removed, but Cole could still see their impact, subtle scars in reality that would take time to fully heal. Pierce's luminous form waited at the circle's center, more defined than the other Watchers who hovered at the periphery. Though his features had long since transformed beyond human recognition, something in his posture still conveyed the ranger he had once been. Continuity maintained, Pierce communicated directly to Cole's mind. New guardian established. Cycle preserved. I have questions, Cole replied. So many questions. Understanding comes with time. The boundary is both barrier and bridge. You will learn to walk between. Michael stood respectfully back, unable to perceive Pierce, but aware of his presence. I should get back to Washington. There will be inquiries, investigations. What will you tell them? Cole asked. As much truth as they can handle. That the forest contains phenomena we don't understand and shouldn't interfere with. Michael hesitated. They'll come back, you know. Different department, different project name, but the same objective. I'll be watching, Cole assured him. We all will. After Michael departed, Cole sat alone at the stone circle, feeling the boundaries between worlds thin and strengthen in natural rhythm like cosmic tides. The Watchers had withdrawn to their reality, but he could sense them, constant observers maintaining their side of the ancient pact. From his pocket, Cole removed a final item, a sealed letter he'd written the night before. Addressed to Eleanor Jenkins at the Historical Society, it contained everything he'd discovered, along with instructions to preserve Pierce's journals and letters for future rangers who might be called to service. Most importantly, it included a single page of coordinates, the location of every boundary stone and observation point throughout the forest. This knowledge needed to be preserved, passed down to those who might walk this path after him. As Cole placed the letter in a hollow tree marked with the Guardian symbol, he felt a subtle shift in reality, a thinning of the veil that separated dimensions. Through this momentary window he glimpsed other Guardians across time, Pierce in 1902, Blackwood in 1972, and others stretching back centuries, all performing the same duty in their own eras. The vision faded, leaving Cole alone in the forest that had been his home for 20 years, and would remain his responsibility for many more. His ranger training had prepared him well for this expanded role. Observe, protect, maintain balance. The boundaries between worlds were just another ecosystem requiring stewardship. That evening, Cole returned to his cabin one last time. He packed lightly a few personal items, Pierce's journals, the strange compass. Everything else he would leave behind. Rangers learned to travel with minimal possessions. As he prepared to depart, a soft knock sounded at his door. Opening it revealed no visitor, just a small envelope on the porch, bearing the insignia of the early Forest Service. Inside was a single sheet of paper containing one line in Thomas Pierce's handwriting. "Welcome to the longest patrol route in existence. Ranger Dawson." Cole smiled, tucked the note into Pierce's journal, and headed toward the deep forest. Above him, stars shimmered in patterns only he could fully perceive, some belonging to this reality, others to the adjacent world he now helped guard. The boundaries between would require constant vigilance, but he was well prepared for the duty. After all, he'd always been a ranger at heart. Now he simply had more wilderness to protect.